Threadbridge's first Pride event of 2021. Thank you so much, Aisha, for joining us today, who I'm really excited to be speaking to. This year at Threadbridge, as part of our Pride celebrations, we have a new charity partner called GiveOut. Aisha is actually on the board of trustees for this charity. It's a charity that advocates for LGBTQIA human rights globally. Among all of the other things that Aisha does, we get to speak to her today on some really interesting topics. So we will be talking about Aisha's experience as an LGBTQI activist in London with her company Moonlight Experiences. We'll also be talking about UK Black Pride, gender identity and pronouns, working with our charity partner GiveOut, and then we'll also have some time at the end for some questions as well. So please send those over to Aria while we're chatting. So over to you, Aisha. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely.
Background.
Can you hear me all right? Brilliant. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of, I guess, Pride celebrations and just this moment, just to talk to you a little bit about myself and the work I do within the community with my own company, Moonlight Experiences, as well as for GiveOut and UK Black Pride. I mean, essentially, I've just always championed diversity, integration, and equality. And it's interesting right now, it just happens that a massive plane is going over me. All day, it hasn't done so, but decided to do so right this second. But I hope you can still hear me okay. But a lot of the work I do is all about trying to uplift marginalized voices. With my company, Moonlight Experiences, we started it so that we can dedicate the celebration of queer culture, nightlife, and community, because often it's very difficult to hear about the diverse views and, I guess, the different type of people that exist within our community. The media for so long only tends to portray one type of kind of queer person or queer narrative, and it's important to kind of change that through integrating people, welcoming them into the community, educating them, but as well as giving them an opportunity so that they can support us and in an authentic way. And so this is what I do with Moonlight Experiences. When people meet us in person or online, we want to show them the best of our city, because most of the time when people Google queer things to do in London, LGBTQ parties or clubs, they get sent over to Soho. And there's a whole history surrounding Soho because it became the epicenter of queer culture due to the molly houses that existed there back in the 18th and 19th century. But a lot of those kind of molly houses kind of were taken by gay white men. So evidently over time, that is the type of clubs and kind of venues that still exist up to today. We only have one queer venue for queer women that exists in Soho. And then alongside that, we do have quite a bit of club nights outside of that, but it's very, very difficult to access those if you're not living in London, if you don't know somebody, and often Soho can feel quite isolating for people who don't feel like they fit in. And it's just important to feel that wherever we are, whether we live in a city or whether we're visiting, we still feel welcome and we still feel part of that community. But alongside that is to also be mindful when we travel to be supporting queer venues that need it, not just the ones that are the most popular. So a lot of the things we do actually goes back into the community where we are sustaining LGBTQ venues and supporting creatives as well that are not often promoted, such as drag kings and certain marginalized drag queens as well. Right. I mean, the work I've started doing with UK Black Pride, my journey with them started, I would say, about 3, 4 years ago. I actually met my fiance at UK Black Pride, and we're still there. There's a lot to do with UK Black Pride. And I am the head of community engagement there. And UK Black Pride, a lot of people don't know, but it has been around for over 15 years. We're going to celebrate our 16th birthday this year in August. And it is a celebration that's still kind of upholds the values from when Pride started, because Pride is still a protest. And UK Black Pride actually is Europeans' kind of largest celebration of anybody who's LGBTQ plus, of African, Asian, Caribbean, Middle Eastern, and anybody from kind of the whole diaspora. And what we try to do is ensure that, again, is giving that sense of belonging, making sure that there is a home for people who don't feel represented, I guess, in mainstream Pride or in other prides, like, for example, London Pride, because it's still kind of problematic that up to now, despite the fact that London is such a melting pot, that our prides do not represent the people that live within the city. People who are, for example, queer women, queer people of color, all of these kind of groups are always kind of sidelined during London Pride. And also there isn't enough support from those who are disabled, who also are non-binary or trans. I don't feel that certain prides are doing enough to change that. Whereas UK Black Pride, which was co-founded by Lady Phil, tries to change that. And it all started specifically 15 years ago when they decided to go to Southend on Sea just to take like a busload of women, of Black women, to the seaside. And they realized, actually, wouldn't this be so beautiful if we can have a regular, probably yearly event where we can meet people who look like us, who sound like us, because it's important to, of course, integrate, but to be in a place where you feel like you belong, where you don't need to always, I don't know, fight for who you are. You don't need to always worry. You don't need to answer to anybody, just to feel like you're at home. So this is why UK Black Pride is so important. And up to now, some people go, hey, why don't you join the normal Pride? Why is it called Black Pride? Am I allowed to come to, UK Black Pride? I'm not Black. And I think a lot of people just need to understand that the word Black was used in its political sense, and it started 15 years ago. And it was important to distinguish, ourselves from the mainstream Pride. But also is a place of where people can come and be welcomed. Despite the fact that you might not be from the diaspora, you can come in also and feel like you belong. Because often, as I said, mainstream Pride doesn't just um, discriminate or leaves out, queer people of color. There's a lot of people within our community that just feel like it's just not good enough. And this is mainly also due to the fact that most prides are pink washed. There's a lot of pink washing due to, corporations taking over. So local queer people don't actually feel like these prides are for us. So this is why there needs to be an alternative where we can feel, actually, you know what, this is also our pride. Whilst we want people to come over and to celebrate with us, we don't want Pride to just be a party, because you can, I mean, I tend to say you can come for the party, but you should stay for the protest. Come and enjoy, but when the time comes where you need to uplift, when you need to support our community, you should do so. Regardless of who you are, if you have a certain privilege, if you're able to support somebody, you should be able to do that, not just coming in and partying and leaving just during Pride Month. This is something you can do all year long, regardless if you are a man and you want to fight for women's rights, you should be doing that all year long. Again, if you want to champion those with disability, you don't have to be one in order to promote and to uplift those people, those marginalized groups. And this is the reason why Pride still exists, despite the fact that it may seem that, yes, there is equality, we are getting a certain representation of just gay white men who do have more privilege than most people. So when you look at it, you go, what are they fighting about? Why do they keep talking about pride? Everybody can be everybody can be themselves. Yes, we might be able to be okay in this country, but across the world, there's still loads of LGBT siblings who are not able to be themselves, who are constantly, um, you know, either facing hostility, violence, and loads of, cruel situations across the world with their freedom being taken away from them. So, pride is there so that we can constantly uplift each other.
Yeah, I think allyship has been a huge theme that's happened in the, well, not happened, it's not new, but it's been a huge topic of conversation in the past year or so. How has coronavirus impacted UK Black Pride being able to happen, given that we've seen so many Pride marches and events cancelled in the past 2 years? How is it adjusting to the new landscape?
I mean, just like everybody else, we've kind of migrated to online event. Last year we did also do a big digital Pride celebration. It didn't stop us celebrating online. We had over 30,000 people that actually attended, which is incredible. And again, this year we're going to do the same. We've got our theme, Love and Rage, which we're going to be doing over the course of the 2nd and 4th of July. So anybody is free to attend. It's digital. There's loads of different digital stages, from the well-being stage, interface kind of room, and then you have also young queer folks room, just different stages, as well as the main event happening on the Sunday, which will be streamed live with variety of performers and talks throughout the day. So I definitely urge anybody who wants to learn about our community just to hop on and watch and kind of learn and just also enjoy.
Yeah, you also mentioned that with the beginning of Black Pride, it was to make sure that people who were often left out of the main Pride events, in terms of how identities intersect, another group that is often left out in these intersections is gender diverse, transgender, non-binary people. Could you discuss a little bit about the gender spectrum and pronouns, the importance of them, and how we can use them correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have something like 12 different gender identities that exist within our communities, and as well as I think we are perhaps 23 different sexual orientations. And one of the things about gender is for so long, we've always been told that there is only, you can only be male or female, and there's nothing else. And I think now, due to more awareness. I mean, thankfully, social media also has its advantages through share of social interaction. We are more aware and we are able to share that information that that's not the case because, you gender does exist on a spectrum, almost on a continuum. And you can see there on the graph where you have kind of female and male, and then you have the in between where it can exist, where, you can be non binary. You don't have to just exist within being either male or female. But also, it's this weird notion of not understanding that who we are is part of a lot of things. In terms of our identity, our orientation, our sex, as well as our expression. That's what makes us who we are, not just one thing versus the other. And this brings me to the fact that, it's just to be a bit more mindful of pronouns. How do we use them? How do we also make those who are non-binary or trans feel more welcome? It could be something as little as, putting in your email signature, your pronouns. It really helps and normalizes talking about, gender identities. And also it's that kind of respect so that you don't misgender somebody. You shouldn't be assuming what somebody's pronouns is or how they identify based on what they look like, what they sound like, what hair length they have, or the type of clothes that they wear. So gender and as well as sexual orientation are so fluid. And what we are in terms of, I guess, gender identity or sexual orientation when we're young doesn't also have to be what will be in the next couple of years or when we get older. You know, it is there for us to also explore who we are, because sometimes, either in our youth or in our jobs or in our life, we never had access or the opportunity to do so. I mean, for example, there are also certain sexual orientations that exist within our community where you can identify, but it doesn't mean that you are queer. For example, being asexuals, if somebody who's asexual doesn't have any sexual interaction or attraction to other people. Well, that could happen to anybody. It doesn't, you don't have to be queer to be asexual. Again, or demisexual, it's similar to asexual, but people who are demisexual require kind of an intimate emotional bond with somebody before having kind of those sexual attractions. And for example, my sister recently, we were having a discussion about different gender identities and sexual orientation. And she thought, oh, actually, you know what? I didn't realize it. Perhaps I may be demisexual. And, she's somebody that has always identified as straight, and she still does. But it also helps you understand yourself. Why is it that I am attracted to a particular type of person, or why my relationships, I constantly, the moment, for example, for her, the moment a guy does something, she's like, oh no, that's not me. You need to also understand yourself and how you deal with relationships over time. And, it's not just for the queer community, it's for anybody who needs to be aware of themselves. And also, if you're aware of yourself in that way, sometimes it helps also in understanding others.
Yeah, I think it's becoming so much more accepted now. I think, as you said, with social media, having more accessible conversations about pronouns and gender, it's really opening up. Do you think this is starting to filter into, the TV we watch, films, books? Do you think there's any kind of like gap that's happening where it's slightly out of date?
Yeah, no, in terms of media, absolutely. It is out of date, but I am glad to see that representation coming in through certain series, on the BBC or Netflix. There are more queer relationships, and I'm saying queer, not just gay, but because there is that representation of those who are trans as well as non-binary, and also just the addition of including queer people of color. For example, for me, I never saw anybody who looked like me on TV. And, I come from an African background as well as a Muslim and kind of strong Christian ties. And for so long, I thought being queer is something that only white people were supposed to be. Because again, all the queer people I've ever seen, none of them were Black. None of them were a person of color. And, it also feeds into that ideology that you're not allowed to be who you are. And it really does take time, and it's really difficult to navigate through those feelings when you are a teenager, when you're going through, hormonal changes, when you are, facing all the little issues that happen as a child growing up. Adding this factor of not knowing who you are, of being in an emotional turmoil, is very difficult for a young person to handle. And this is why representation really does matter, and visibility matters, in terms of diversity and in terms of just ensuring that we see ourselves in others, because it's truly, when I started to see people like who look like me, who sounded like me, it gave me a lot of confidence and self-belief that, I can be the person I've always thought I wanted to be.
Yeah, I think representation has really improved in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years for queer visibility. How would you, because people are still coming to terms with it in terms of people that may be new to the concept of pronouns, how would you go about educating someone that may be a bit resistant to using someone's pronouns or may not understand why it's important?
I would say if you're not sure how to use it, it's simply use gender neutral terms. You don't have to call somebody a sir or madam. You don't have to say he or she. You can use their names. And if you're unsure, it's always easier to just ask. And the importance of, using pronouns it can be without just, adding the respect element. It's important because you should not be misgendering somebody on purpose, especially when you know that, when they've given you that pronouns. Because, it's the same idea of if you, let's say, as a cisgender person, has always identified as a he, how would you feel if somebody started calling you a she? That doesn't make sense. It's exactly the same thing. You go through your life going, oh, yes, I'm a cisgendered man. And, somebody random, every time they saw you, they were like, there she is, that for them feels the same. It's odd because that's not who they are. You shouldn't be misgendering somebody, especially after you are aware of the, correct pronouns.
Yeah. Here in the UK, I feel like this has been quite a contentious issue in the media. Who would you suggest people to? Is there anyone that you would suggest people following or reading up on that might be able to balance negative articles that we read in the public, in media publications, where people can get a better, more well-rounded idea of gender, pronouns, the experience of transgender people? Anyone who might be good spokespeople on these topics, or books, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of people, I mean, I'm good friends with Kenny, Ethan Jones, and yeah, like he's incredible because he also talks about being trans and in terms of also, normalizing the ideas of periods and talking about that as well, because there's a lot of, I guess, taboo subjects, especially, I guess, in the UK. We don't want to talk about these things. It's almost better to brush across it and not mention it. So there's quite a few activists on social media that are constantly putting out information. But also, I would say follow the likes of UK Black Pride. We have tons of articles, as well as, of course, Stonewall in the UK as well, major charities. And if there's a particular, I guess, subgroup or a community that you're not sure about, you can follow their charities. You have the likes of Mermaids, who do a lot of work, promoting transgender kids and also supporting them. So there are so many charities that you could be supporting. And also, if you want to learn about a community and you want to be an ally, volunteer. We always welcome volunteers at UK Black Pride. Whilst you integrate, sometimes it's always easier to also understand and to learn directly from us. Learn from the discussions we put on, learn from the talks that you'll be listening to, and just kind of generally getting a sense of the type of community that we are, which is so freaking cool, by the way, because once you come, you just realize how fun we are and just how amazing you feel also being around us, because it really is a place of acceptance. And that's what you realize, is that energy that we create and nothing else.
Yeah. How can a company like Third Bridge implement these things more in making sure that colleagues and clients feel at ease themselves and not just tolerated but celebrated for why they are different?
I think having these regular kind of talks and these sessions is very important. And also, bringing in, activists like myself, but also not just now, but throughout the year. And also just giving that room for people to grow, because there's so much that I could be saying about our community, but also, just taking our time and doing it slowly so that you can have that time to process, because there's a lot of things that all of us, none of us are perfect. We always have to be on learning. We always have to be, seeking to improve ourselves in terms of our personal growth. And it does take time, But whilst you're doing the work, whilst you're changing, you are also becoming a better person and also looking and shaping the world in a different way so that we don't make the same mistakes that we have been doing in the past, but actually ensuring that future generations carry on and, in terms of building a better world.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that is a perfect segue onto me getting to ask you about GiveOut and what you do for GiveOut, how the charity works, and the kind of campaigns it's running at the moment that are impacting on a global basis.
Yeah, no, GiveOut is such an incredible charity. I am so pleased to be part of. I mean, it is an award-winning charity, but the main purpose is to bring together our community as well as corporate allies so that they can give in to support LGBTQ activism around the world. So what we do is we identify pioneering groups across the world. We do consultations with them. We do our due diligence. We vet them, and then we are also guided by our grant making advisory panel as well as our board of trustees, which I'm part of. So we take that pool of donations and then we give it out in grants to LGBTQ organizations around the world. So what we want to do is ensure that we are giving the resources that they need to defend their communities so that either they can tackle the inequalities that's going on or do various campaigns, not just once, but those campaigns that truly make a long-lasting change. And that's why it's important. And we do have quite a few partners that we work with. We have something like over 30 LGBTQI organizations around 5 continents, all in aid of ensuring that they defend their communities and for them to do the work, because it's very difficult to want to help a community when you are so far away. So by giving those resources, we're able to do so quite easily. We had our campaign for COVID over last year. We did put out a massive fund that went out to support so many people in the Caribbean, in India, in the Middle East, as well as North Africa. And also one of our partners in law and policy making was actually involved in the landmark decriminalization case in India. And up to now, we do still provide legal support to anybody who's LGBTQ that needs it in those regions. So it's absolutely important, the work that we are doing, because it just means that we are providing the resource that all these communities need at different times. We're not just doing it once and then, going, hey, we've done our part, but ensuring that this is a long-term relationship that we build, and so that they can truly get that liberation that they need and to fight as well as to defend their communities.
What might those resources look like in different parts of the world? Because obviously LGBTQ plus rights in the UK and the US might be very different to other parts of the world. How do these change between different parts of the world, and what are the different levels of progress that are happening globally at the moment?
So it really, really varies. So for example, in the Caribbean, we actually, over time, we created a network that never existed over there. So that work was kind of that work came about over a number of years through our grant making schemes. So that is one example. And again, up to now, as I mentioned, that one of our partners was working on the legal case in India. And up to now, anybody who does need support gets that through GiveOut. So there are loads of different cases that we definitely we follow, as well as new organizations that we seek or either come to us in order to kind of support through giving.
Yeah. By the way, everyone, a little reminder, if anyone has any questions to ask Aisha, please send them over to Aria now, and we'll have a little time at the end to go through them. So where at the moment, what are the campaigns? How have they been impacted with coronavirus, and how much of it is online versus real groundwork around the world? And has it moving to online made it easier or more difficult to do real groundwork in a different place?
I mean, it's so interesting because, at the beginning of the pandemic, we thought this was something that was, I guess, had a global spread and it was equal. But of course, we know that's not the case. There are a few regions and countries around the world where they've dealt better with the pandemic, and whereas places like India, which we've all heard, and places in Africa who are still struggling and who still need that support. So our COVID-19 Solidarity Fund has been supporting them. We've been given to certain groups and organizations in there so that they can ensure that at least their LGBTQ members have a little bit of those resources that they need. And also as GiveOut, we're so proud that we've managed to create a climate fund because again, it's the climate fund is something that I think as a whole community and society, you either are environmentally conscious or you are not, and then you have people that kind of float in between. And that art of giving and giving towards the climate fund also changes that community just because you're able to create a more sustainable way of living, especially if you're doing that directly to our LGBTQ community. So this is the reason why we started that climate fund for so many reasons.
And what's going to be the outlook for GiveOut? What's the sort of mission statement that you would like to achieve in terms of anything that is more of a 5 or 10 year goal? Where do you hope for things to be?
Oh, wow. That's a really interesting question. I think in the next 10 years is building communities that are more resourceful and that are more able to sustain themselves, because what we want to do is not to, go in there and go, oh, we're going to save you. We have all of this. We can do the work. Don't worry, move aside. This is what we do in the West. No, but it's giving those communities the tools that they need so that they can create the impact that feels right for them. Because we don't know that, we all live, most of us in the West. And therefore, really, as I mentioned, being an ally, being somebody who either has privilege or who is able to support somebody else or uplift them, you can do that through giving, and you can do that through giving resources. And even in terms of giving resources, I can give an example of what one of the allies I know has done specifically, not just for me, but for the community in London. We are looking now to open a new LGBTQ venue in Shoreditch. And this has come directly from an ally who owns a few businesses, a few restaurants in London. And she has decided to give us a brick and mortar space. Again, this is an example of an ally because, as I kept mentioning, our LGBTQ spaces are safe spaces for us, places that we can get away, places where we can meet as a community, where we can be ourselves. And it's very, very difficult. I mean, anywhere in the world, to keep buildings open, to have venues. But if you have one and if you are able to offer it to the community, I think that is a prime example of what it means to be an ally, is using your resources to support a community. And, this venue, we want to, have an alternative to what we have, for example, as I said, in Soho, a place where people can come to not just educate themselves, but learn about marginalized voices. We're going to have an intersectional bookshop with 1,500 titles of LGBTQ experiences. We're going to have an event space, which also offers like a sober event as well. Again, promoting spaces that isn't surrounded by just alcohol, because a lot of queer people tend to find themselves at night because they're not able to be themselves during the day, and often these club nights always have alcohol, always promote that idea of it. And again, it's not really the best way to constantly go in order to meet queer people. So having an alternative space is really, a godsend. Alongside that, we also have a restaurant as well as like a little bar over there. So, having this ally and having these resources will absolutely make a big difference in the lives of queer people in London or anybody coming to visit us.
Why do you think, because we talked about visibility and representation improving, why do you think it's so hard to sort of keep hold of queer space, given that I know you and I have talked previously about nightlife, and you said how I think 20 years ago there were so many more queer bars for women, and now we, as you said at the beginning of our talk today, there's now one in London. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's, it's so true. I mean, even in the US, they had about 200, back in the 1990s, and now we're talking about tens, so it's really dramatically dropped. And I think for us, it's also the lack of resources and the lack of support, not just, let's say, within the LGBTQ community, but just in general. There is also, for me, there is a lot more of, in my opinion, inequality surrounding women pay and the type of jobs we get and the type of positions we get. Whereas if you compare, I guess, let's say, traditional gay man or gay white man versus a lesbian or queer woman, there is a big difference in terms of, our equity, in terms of our time, in terms of the jobs we get, in terms of our progress. All of that does limit, what we do within the community, how much we spend. But at the same time, it's the fact that we are not given the opportunity and the spaces to flourish. It's not saying that, queer women don't like going out or drinking or enjoying themselves. We do, but we just don't have enough spaces. For example, Sheba, I went when I was a lot younger, but, it's a small, dingy den, whereas when
Outside
you
area.
you know what I mean? And it's what I've enjoyed now is that being able to be outside because now we've got that al fresco kind of dining style and it's lovely. It's not that we don't want to go there, it's the fact that actually it doesn't have that capacity and that space or that difference that we may need. You don't want to always be in a place where, your shoes are sticking to the floor. It's nice to have different spaces to enjoy. So there are various reasons. And I don't know, some people say it's due to social media or dating sites. People meet and then they don't want to go out anymore. And that is also a problem because it means that these spaces aren't able to cater to couples, to older people. I mean, if we have alternative space that do that, of course, I'm going to keep going out. I mean, I go out anyway, but of course, other people want to go out as couples, as a family. Are these places truly inclusive? If they're not, this is the reason why, for example, queer women's spaces are closing down, aren't succeeding because they still have the same format from, let's say, the 1970s and 80s. We're in 2020, but yet we're still working with something that we've had for a very long time. It just doesn't work. We're not adapting and we're not changing to fit the modern time.
So how can we adapt with making the online space more comfortable for people? So we discussed pronouns. What does it mean to put our pronouns into an email signature or our LinkedIn or Instagram?
It just means you are more inclusive, more open to these conversations and dialogue, and it also makes you appear more open to the queer community, as opposed to, I guess, somebody who you don't see that. We are, I guess, as an LGBT community, we are also very loyal and also want to only support places where we feel like we're wanted and where we feel represented and visible. So this is why it's so important.
Exactly. I think we recently saw that LinkedIn and Instagram have now made that a permanent feature on their actual websites. So it's not something that people have to do themselves. Do you think this should become the norm for all platforms, or do you think it will still take some time?
It should be the norm, but I think it will take some time. But again, like with major platforms and businesses, it's almost like sometimes they want to do it just to ensure that they get in the pink coin. But if they do it, despite the fact that they're a business and they want that, it truly makes a massive difference to somebody whose pronouns really matters, you know. And of course, it's I guess why wouldn't you want to make somebody feel welcome, to make somebody feel like they belong? I mean, just by simply putting, I don't know what, 4 letters or 8 letters below your signatures.
Yeah, it doesn't really require you losing anything to create that space. You
Not at
mentioned
all.
the pink pound several times. Just in case anyone watching doesn't know what that means, could you just briefly explain what the pink pound is and what pinkwashing means?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The pink pound is referring to, I guess, the economical wealth of the LGBTQ community. Um, and a lot of people tend to want to have the pink pound during Pride Month. And, by doing that, by wanting this pink pound just for that moment, that means that you are actually just pink washing. You're just there for the moment as a corporation. So you see an opportunity, hey, it's Pride Month. Put a flag on all your water bottles. Put a flag on all your stickers. Hey, do a discount on all, I don't know, your tops with a rainbow color, or price it up a little bit more because the queers are coming. You know, that is what I mean by pink washing. And also, I mean, for me, in terms of travel, that is also an area where we know for a lot of people do that, because LGBTQ members travel 46 times more than heterosexual. And also, just alone in the UK, we spent something like 60 to 70 billion pounds each year. When you think about it, it's quite staggering for a community that's supposed to be very, very small. And, millions of queer people travel across the globe as well. But again, there's a lot of companies and luxury travel agents that only solely wants to target this particular groups because they know they have a lot of money. And this is why, for me, being in the travel kind of industry, I want that visibility, because I want to make sure that, if you are a queer woman, if you are a woman in general, that you feel like there are services out there for you. Because most of, when you look at posters, promotions, and the media, a lot of people that they showcase within their companies do not look like me, because they think, oh no, those are not the people that have the pink, pound. We need, your stereotypical white gay man, who love luxury, but, living in a luxurious way. That's what they think that, where the pink pound is. But that's absolutely not the case. Queer women travel all the time. Women travel solo. There is that rise. And actually, a lot of people are missing out by not being inclusive and diverse in any industry. You get a lot more out of your staff, more productivity if you have a more diverse team.
My last question from me before we move on to any questions from everyone else. So if you haven't sent them in to Aria yet, please do. But talking about pinkwashing, companies targeting queer audiences, things like travel companies, obviously yours is for LGBTQ plus people. What are the problems with a company targeting a queer audience for the wrong reasons, and how can this go wrong, or why is it dangerous for the queer community, and how can that be either stopped, or what can companies do to actually facilitate the existence of queer people?
One of the things is we're not stupid. We can see it often when companies are sticking up the rainbow flag or doing an ad with queer people. Half the time they don't use LGBTQ members. They just get two straight girls to pretend to be that they're a couple. We see right through it. I don't know why they still do that. But if you want to support our community, if you during Pride, during let's say all year long. If you want to be inclusive and diverse, then employ those people within your teams. It's like you shouldn't be talking about people or anybody, any person in our community or in society without them being present, without hearing from their voices. I mean, I sometimes still find it staggering when I go to travel exhibitions or conferences and they're talking about diversity without a single woman on that panel without any person of color in that panel. And yet, these are predominantly, men, white men, just talking about diversity and inclusion. And, I find that you should not be doing that. You should be bringing the people you are talking about. If you're promoting a product for a range of people, you should be having them on your team. If you don't know about how to support those people who are disabled, well, just bring them on board. You need to, that's how you create a more authentic brand, or you can sell to the community. Because the moment I see that work being done, immediately I do buy those products, and I do become a loyal customer. I mean, I've seen the change in, companies like Skyscanner. I've worked with them in the past as well. And immediately, if you were to go to their Instagram feed, you will see that diversity. And this has happened over time because over the last few years, they have employed a lot of diverse queer people within their company. And it's just so evident and transparent. And it doesn't look forced. It looks kind of organic and it looks right. And when we do use those services, we can notice the difference because they are doing the work.
Yeah, honestly, I could talk about this for hours, but I think we're going to have to wrap up and move on to questions. But Aisha, thank you so much for all of this. It's been really interesting. Moving on to questions with Aria. Do we have any questions to answer? Okay, I got them. So Aisha, do you believe it's helpful for straight people to refer to their partner as partner and not girlfriend or boyfriend, so that queer people do not have to feel the pressure to come out to everyone when they're not ready?
Oh, that's such a lovely question. Yes, I absolutely think that is so much better. And you know what? For so many years, so I also, I work in the science industry, and for so many years, I never came out. Just because all the time when I start my new job, people are asking me, "Oh, do you have a husband? Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have any kids?" Immediately these are the things that I get thrown at. Oh, how was your weekend? Did you spend it with your boyfriend or did you go out with the lad? Like constantly it's this assumption. So instead, I truly do feel better if you're asking me about my partner or saying, "Hey, Aisha, do you have any partners or do you have a loved one? Do you have a family?" It really immediately just makes me want to open up. And also, again, if you're referring to your partner, it just opens up that room for dialogue that comes across very open-minded. So yeah, absolutely love that question.
I think also for queer people to be able to then say who they are with, there's a lot of empowerment in that as well. Getting to say girlfriend
Absolutely.
or boyfriend as well as partner as well. I think there's so much strength in
Absolutely.
that. So next question. Aisha, I loved your comment on coming to Pride to party but staying to protest. What can Third Bridge do to advocate for the LGBTQ plus community? A friend recently suggested adoption leave. Are there other considerations to support the community in a professional capacity?
Oh, great question as well. I love these questions. I think, yeah, send more if we have time. Definitely adoption leave, I think, is another good example of supporting the community. I mean, my mom for so long has been like a foster carer for so many years, as well as also she has also adopted. And I feel like, there are different, so many ways of having families, of being a family, and by your company and recognizing that, it really also validates your own family and your loved ones. And I think that is a prime example of what, for example, Third Bridge can do.
Yeah. Third question. How would you recommend managers address groups in a work setting? I often find myself saying things like guys or ladies and gents, but given what you said about misgendering, how can we avoid that?
Yeah, again, use gender neutral kind of terms when you're talking to people. Hello, everybody. Hi, hey, gang. I mean, it really depends on how you address people. Hey, team. How there's so many words you can use that are gender neutral that you don't like. Hey, guys and girls, but again, it takes time to unlearn these things, but when you catch yourself doing it, it's just correcting yourself, especially if you're not aware of a group of people that you work with and whether they do have different pronouns. And this is why also it's important to ask, because if you ask and you're entering a group of, you're with a group of people that do identify as male and female, then that's fine. Then, you're going, hi, girls and boys, it's cool because you are gendering everybody correctly. But if you're not sure, always use gender neutral terms. I think it's far better anyway.
I suppose it's always a good insurance. If in doubt, always use gender neutral anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if you want to get that pronouns absolutely right, just ask.
Fourth question. How would you recommend being an ally in the Black community to a younger family member or friend who you feel as though is struggling with their sexual orientation or gender identity?
Oh, that's a lovely question as well. I think also, being from a marginalized group, being Black, like it's even harder coming out within our community just because of again like the colonial past that Africans have faced, and even up to now, stating that homosexuality is on Africa. There's so many things associated with it, so many years of needing to unlearn all these ideas that aren't true. And I think the simplest thing is perhaps people, everybody takes time to also figure out who they are. But also, I feel like it's being in a space where they can talk to you. You can offer, for example, to take them to Pride if they want to and say, hey, there's a Pride event going on. I would love to go. Would you like to come with me? Again, talking about perhaps, your favorite TV shows that have queer members, if you have them. So just kind of normalizing the conversation, because a lot of people, what they don't realize is sometimes when they're around young people or kids, is we use certain language and information that really makes us feel uncomfortable. But when you're younger, you're not able to kind of say that to your mom, to your uncle, or to your big sister. So I think also being mindful of how you refer to other people, because kids really pick up on those things. And if you do less of that, they're also more likely to want to come out or to want to speak to you or to feel comfortable, because you are creating that space where they can actually feel like they can chat to you about these things.
I suppose as well as adults, we have so much more access to education and resources anyway, that we already have this terminology that you just wouldn't have if you're 14 or 15. So it is very different in terms of even being able to articulate how you feel in your gender or sexuality. Sorry, so we have one last question. In your view, what more would you like to see in terms of queer representation in Britain? How can businesses truly show support year-round without pinkwashing for just 1 month of the year?
Yeah. Fantastic question to end. I mean, one of the things we do at UK Black Pride is we get like quite a few donations and sponsorships, similar to like, the donations we're getting through GiveOut. But what we say to those people who are coming to us, and even for me, in terms of working with anybody, what are you doing to support queer people within your own organization? Do you have any training schemes that you've put in place? Are you actively also looking and progressing those members? Why is it, again, let's say if we're talking about women, why is it that you don't have any women within your company that are in a higher level position? So anybody that comes to us that wants to work with us, we ask them those questions. And if you're unable to answer them, then that is the problem. Then are you actually wanting to support us for the right reason? Or are you just doing it so that you look good and so that you look like you support diverse charities or organizations? So I always say the work starts with you as a company or as an individual. Because when you're doing those work, like the moment you start supporting us, it really does it comes across as authentic. You don't actually have to think about it because one, your whole company and your whole team is already diverse. So the things you support and how you manage things just comes across naturally because you are hearing from the voices of the people that represent us. So in reality, it makes it a lot more easier. So I would say it's almost like charity begins at home. Charity begins in your workplace with the people that you currently have. Are all your LGBTQ members in your workplace happy? Have you spoken to them about the difficulties that they've encountered? Do they feel safe in the space that you have created as an organization? Are you having these conversations, not just during Pride, but throughout the whole year? And if you are not, you need to start there. And actually, that will open your eyes a lot more. And then later on, you can support all of these organizations.
Aisha, I think that's a perfect place to end on. You've given us so much to think about, I think, professionally and personally. Thank you so much. I feel like I could sit and talk to you about this for so long, as I've said about 10 times. But thank you so much for coming in. I know you're super busy doing so many things for the community. Everyone, please go and follow Aisha on social media and keep up to date with everything she's doing. And thank you so much for tuning in. Please keep an eye on our SOC Diversity channel for the rest of our plans for Pride Month. And we will keep you posted. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Thank you.